Hey, you guys, this is Josh with Homesteading Family, and welcome to this week's episode of the Pantry Chat Food for Thought. Today, we're going to be talking about raising meat rabbits. And to be totally candid with you, I don't know much about meat rabbits at all. We've never raised meat rabbits before, but they are an excellent option for the small holder or the backyard homesteader. And I'm really pleased today to have Daniel Salatin of Polyface Farms joining me. If you guys know his story at all, he started raising rabbits under the watchful eye of his dad, Joel Salatin, and has continued to do that through to today. So he's the guy that to talk to. He's the guy that knows all about rabbits. And there's no better way to develop a small farming entrepreneurial savvy than by tagging after an expert, right? Especially when that expert is your dad, Joel Salatin. Now, Daniel grew up on Polyface Farms and absorbed his father's agroecological practices through a lifetime of full immersion participation. And Daniel started his career earlier, like I was talking about a minute ago, carrying freshly processed chickens when he was in diapers. And by age 7, he'd started his first entrepreneurial venture with pastured rabbits. That business is still going on today, despite having the normal ups and downs of any business, and it's given him firsthand experience with marketing, processing, research and development, reinvestment and profits, and just raising rabbits in general. He knows all the ins and outs. So I'm super excited to bring his knowledge to you today. Uh, but today, Daniel spends his days running the day-to-day operations of Polyface Farms, orchestrating the animal movement, scheduling daily tasks, and overseeing apprentice training. So he's got a lot to do. He's married to Polyface marketing director Sherry Salatin and has 2 sons and 1 daughter. So I am excited to have Daniel on with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, absolutely. Really excited to have you on and talk about rabbits today. It is something that I know nothing about. I've raised a lot of animals over the years, and but rabbits is not one of them. But it's I don't know what you're seeing. We're seeing a large interest in that a lot because people with smaller holdings, backyard homesteaders, are getting involved and wanting to raise more of their own meat. And so I'm excited that you're here to share some knowledge and maybe help people get off on the right foot, or is that the right paw? I don't know. Uh,
Right. The lucky rabbit's foot. That's right.
Lucky rabbit's foot. That's right. But before we dive into our topic, we usually like to just catch up a little bit of what's going on the homestead or the farm. And of course, you run most of the day to day at Polyface these days, don't you?
That's typically correct. Yes. Sometimes I don't feel like I do, but yes, that's my title anyway. No, we have a wonderful team and leadership team, and so I do get to to meet with them and do some farming sometimes, but a lot of administrative stuff. So making sure I still get out in the field as much as I can. But it's going really well. Like I say, we have a early spring looking here, so we've got some green grass already poking through.
Oh,
Um, and yeah, the cows are already starting to munch on a little bit of that. And yeah, we're getting tempted about, throwing some seeds out, throwing some, getting some chickens out on pasture out of the greenhouses and things like that. So you kind of have to pinch yourself a little bit. It still is early March. You can still get snows here in March, and so you kind of have to be careful. But as a general rule, it's definitely looking a lot more like early spring than not. And so we're looking forward to that and getting ready. So yeah, that's kind of what's going on here at the farm, and just kind of we're kind of like coiled snakes right now, just coiled rattlers, ready to strike, ready to get going. So we're just kind of watching that extended forecast and getting ready to go.
yeah, you got to be right because when it hits, it hits. You go from maintenance mode to full on sprint, and
Yep, yep,
you got to be
that's
ready to
right.
run.
Get them outside, for sure.
Yeah, and you guys really do. I mean, we're just homesteading and we've got our hands full, but you've got a full operation and getting the beef cows out and the broilers and the egg layers
Right, right.
and I imagine some rabbits too. I don't know. I know you're still doing that enterprise. I don't know how much of it plays into the full picture, but I'm
Sure.
sure that's a
Yeah,
piece of
it's
the
we call it crossover weeks, but that idea of in about 2 week period, typically everything that's inside is outside. Now some of the things like the does and stuff, we'll talk about that as we get into rabbits, but some of the breeding stock doesn't go all the way outside, but they go from their winter housing of the greenhouses to the more cooler barn or high tunnel covered structure where they get shade and airflow and things like that to keep them cool. Where the greenhouse just gets way too hot.
Yeah.
So anyway, a lot of that applies to all the animals. The pigs have to go on the compost, the cows have to go out, the layers go out, all these things. And so yeah, it's quite the crossover weeks of moving things around. But once everything's outside, then you got a beautiful time to kind of coast and let them eat their own feed. So it makes things easier once the transition happens.
Nice. Hey, before we get into rabbits, tell us the short line on who Polyface is. There's going to be people here today that may not know, so I want them to know.
Sure.
When we're talking about Polyface, tell us about that.
Right, sure. So Polyface is a farm on the western edge of the Shenandoah Valley in Virginia. We have been here. My grandparents bought the farm in 1961. We are a grass-based operation, livestock operation farm. So we do very little vegetables. We do zero crops. It's 100% perennial polyculture grasses. Now that being said, for the omnivores, the pigs, the chickens, we do bring in locally sourced, locally milled, GMO free grains for their feed rations, of course. But everything is mobile, everything is movable, and everything is on pasture to the best of its ability, trying to mimic nature and then build those type of prototypes and have their duplication throughout the world. So that's why we do things like this. We talk, we lecture. My dad's written numerous books, Joel Salatin. If you want more information, you can go right to polyfacefarms.com and get all sorts of information, from tours to books to shipping meat across the country, whatever you need. Polyfacefarms.com will get you started.
Right on. Well, yeah, and you guys, if you ever get a chance to go out and see what they do out there, it is an amazing farm.
Well, thank you, Josh. But yes, everyone is always welcome. We have a 24/7 open door policy. Anyone's welcome to come and visit. Whether the store is open or not, the farm's here, and you're welcome to come and see it, and we welcome anybody.
That's an amazing invitation. All right, let's talk rabbits here. So just to begin it, is rabbit raising easy? Is this a approachable subject for people? That's always a question. A lot of people are new to animals. Is this as easy as it might sound or look?
Sure. Well, I think easy is always very relative. It's always easy until you get started, right? It looks easy when someone else is doing it. But rabbits are very easy to get started because they are very low capital infrastructure requirements. So you don't need a lot of money to get started, and which we can get into in some of the housing stuff as we go along. But and they're also you don't need a lot of extra equipment. You don't need a tractor, you don't need a truck, you don't even need a barn to get started in rabbits. And you don't have to they don't require a lot of time because they're kind of a once a day service as far as feed and water. They can be checked on, literally once a day is fine. When they're just the growing up animals, before you've even started breeding them and having babies and stuff, you can check on them every other day. Sometimes you can feed them at bulk and kind of move along. So they do fit in well with like a busy schedule, if you're still working off the homestead or the farm. So just to give you an idea of the ease of it, I started rabbits when I was 8 years old, and I did all of the actual care and maintenance and production of them all the way up to the processing stage at that age. Now, maybe I was advanced for my age. I doubt it, but but the idea of it is really that simple from a care and perspective. It's not like you have to be able to lift big hay bales or shove around large dairy
Mm.
cows or horses, or pick up crates full of meat birds, or move a small chicken coop. They're literally, if you can pick up 10 pounds, you can handle rabbits. And if you've got 5 to 10 minutes every day, you can handle a couple of rabbits. So from that perspective, they are easy. They fit around a busy schedule, or a limited physical ability. Very, very nice. And I say limited, meaning maybe you're just 7 or 8 years old, and so you have not grown into your physical capability yet. That's great. And so they're great to fit in around those cracks, and from a limited cost and infrastructure requirements. So from that perspective, I would throw them into the easy category.
Yeah, it sounds like it. And it sounds like they're a pretty good animal if you've got a busy lifestyle, which a lot of people do as they're transitioning or trying to just do more, raise more of their own within their modern life, right? And so it sounds like this is something that fits in, can fit into a busy schedule pretty easily, and not as large of a commitment as if
Absolutely.
you're
And
a
even
goat or whatever.
right, and even over like meat birds and stuff, meat chickens or laying hens. Laying hens, you kind of have to gather the eggs, you got to close the nesting boxes, and there's some automated things that come about with that now. But still, most people are going out and physically gathering the eggs, closing the nesting boxes, or locking the birds up at night, things like that. You don't have to do that with rabbits. I mean, it's literally a once a day thing. You check them, you water them, you feed them, and we'll get into some automatic water discussion here in a bit. But those kind of things, it's literally once a day deal, and they're very flexible. Like, meaning you could, when they get up to butcher age, you can butcher them at 8 and 9 weeks. If they're big enough, you can butcher them all the way up to 12 and 13 weeks. So it's not something you're like, oh, we're out of town this weekend, but we can't go because we have to butcher rabbits. No, you can put it off till next weekend, or you can do it in an evening, or there are things that move and flex, as opposed to, say like meat birds, for example. When those meat birds have to go outside and they're done in the brooder, like, they got to go. They get really
Oh,
cramped,
oh, yeah.
they get smelly, they get gross, they got to go. And subsequently, when they need to be butchered, they don't wait very long. It's a kind of a 7 to 8 week window, maybe 9 if you push it, but they
Mm.
really need to be butchered at that hard deadline. So rabbits are flexible, and they can also, you can kind of push a pause button on rabbits. Like, if you don't want to breed them, they work best when you breed them consistently, but you can push a pause button and say not breed them for a couple of weeks. If you're, let's say you part it out and you say, hey, we butcher at 12 weeks old, we've got a 4-week gestation, that's 16 weeks. Well, 16 weeks from now, we're going to be on a big family vacation. All right, well, let's not breed for 2 weeks until they get back. Perfect. Easily done.
Yeah, there's a lot more flexibility, was what I'm hearing, with rabbits and that growing cycle and processing cycle than there are with broilers, with meat birds. And I mean, usually that's the other easy entry, right, into raising
Right.
your own meat. But you've got even more flexibility here, without so much constraints on your schedule. One of the things you mentioned that I like about them is you can breed them. We can't do that with the broilers at home. The average person can't, you know, raise those up from eggs and hatch them out and breed them where you can with a rabbit. So you've got a self-replicating supply. And as a homesteader, I'm always looking for that.
Yeah,
Where you can.
and with the fast turnaround, it's basically as fast as a meat bird, without the commitment of, typically when you get into homesteading and you're going to control your own breeding stock, you are talking goats and sheep and pigs and of course cows, um, which are much longer gestation periods. Which is pregnancy. You have a much longer grow out period from birth to when you can actually process the bird. But with rabbits, they literally are like a 16-week turnaround from breed to butcher typically.
Mhm.
And so that means you do control the breeding stock, but your turnover and your breeding to table, if you will, or eating, is still as short as it's very similar to meat birds, or to hatching some baby chicks or something like that. And that goes back to our original question of making them easy.
Yeah, nice. What about the meat though? I mean, a lot of people are familiar with rabbit meat, but a lot of people aren't. So, how is the meat and is that easy for people to get used to?
Right. Well, the that's a great thing about rabbits is it is all white meat. So let's talk the meat is specifically when it's butchered like this and it's young, it's processed. It's very, very tender. It's not gamey at all. It has very much the consistency of like a boneless, skinless chicken breast. Now people might say, oh, yuck, that's kind of dry. And if I cook it wrong, it dries out and it's not very tasty. The nice part about it is it's dark meat. So I may have said that wrong. It's dark meat all throughout, but it has the consistency of the boneless, the white chicken breast. It's a very, very mild meat when it's this way. If it's out in the wild and it's a 2-year-old buck, which is a male rabbit, that can be a very tough and gamey type animal. But these are literally 8 to 12-week-old rabbits. They're not reaching sexual maturity yet, so they're not, you don't have those pheromones and hormones kicking into gear. It's a very, very mild, gentle meat. So if you have family members who are not willing to or ready to get over the mental stigma of the rabbit, the non-easy part of the rabbit, as opposed to the meat birds, is the meat birds get big, they get ugly, they get smelly, they're pretty easy to kill. Rabbits, right, on the other hand, are still pretty doggone cute. And so that's the part that makes them not easy, is that cute factor. And so what I tell people is, listen, you want an endless supply of cute. And so the way you do that is by breeding the does, having a constant supply of the young ones and butchering the other ones, so that you can butcher the ones today and go out to your rabbitry, your racking house, and cuddle the cute little baby ones that are just starting to open their eyes and are just super out of the nesting box and just cute. And the only way you can do that and not literally be overrun by rabbits is to butcher the older ones. Right. And so that's the non-easy part of the rabbits, is to get, but when you're talking about the meat, it's very easy to disguise. If you cook the rabbit, in the oven or in a crock pot or an Instapot or something like that, and pull the meat off the bone and add it to a recipe that would typically require chicken or chicken breast, pulled off boneless chicken. So a casserole, a chicken pot pie, that kind of thing, it will be undetectable, and undifferentiating, differentiatable. I think that's a word. There we go. Between chicken and rabbit. And so when you feed people this, whether it's guests or your family who's not maybe quite sure or got maybe too attached to the rabbits beforehand, they will eat it and be completely unaware. Now, when it's in its bone form, its bone-in form, it looks a little different than chicken. So you got to be careful. But in generally speaking, it is a very mild. The main thing about the rabbit meat itself is because it is it has the tendency of a very it doesn't store its fat in its muscle. It stores it in its organ cavity and on the outside. So like a chicken breast, it doesn't have that intermuscular fat. And so it can dry out very quickly. So a lot of rabbit dishes are, and again, I'm going to get way over my pay grade if I start talking recipes, so I will not go there. That's probably a great, maybe y'all's question, maybe Melissa, I don't know, somebody else. But the big thing on that is it should be some type of sauce or reduction or covered with moisture. So whether it's a wine sauce, whether it's a type of gravy, something that keeps it very, very moist, or you put it in a casserole like this where it stays moist because of all the other products. As long as you do that, it stays very delicious and very moist. Or if you cook it by itself, don't overcook it. Stop very short, and then it doesn't dry out and become tough. And those are key things with the meat part itself.
Well, hence why you hear a lot about rabbit stew when people talk about cooking rabbits stew. Yep. I personally like tacos. Rabbit tacos are, if you like chicken tacos, you'll love rabbit tacos.
Yes. I've not had those personally, but I've heard they're very good. Yes. Yeah.
Well, being from the Southwest, I'll eat anything in a taco.
Amen. There you go. But then again, you're going to cook. I mean, typically you're going to cook that meat up. You're going to debone it. and then you're going to kind of warm it up in your cast iron or whatever. You're going to add your taco seasonings. You typically add some water. You're going to add some that kind of stuff, and then it's going to take on that moisture and be excellent. And then you put your salsa, your guacamole, whatever on it, and that makes it moist again. So that makes a lot of sense.
Cool. Let's talk about feeding rabbits. Can they survive? A lot of people think they can survive just on grass. Like you can put them out in your yard in a like rabbit tractor. I don't know what else to call it.
Yeah, we call it a hairpin.
There you go. And so tell us a little bit about that. What do you need to expect with feeding these guys?
Sure. Well, so that is, in my opinion, a little bit of a misconception on rabbits. Again, it's like chickens. Will a laying hen eat all she needs off of the ground? Sure, at a very, 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 very low density, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you can turn one chicken out in your backyard and she'll lay an egg and she'll live and she'll get what she needs. Will she lay very well in the winter? No. Will she lay a lot of eggs? No, probably not. Can you do that with 20 chickens? No. Same thing with the rabbits. You could turn a couple out in your backyard. They would be able to live perfectly fine. If you have an acre, an acre homestead or a 2-acre homestead, turn a couple rabbits loose. Absolutely. They'd be fine on their own. Putting them in a small, like say tractor, or like we call it a hairpin, you're not going to be able to move them often enough and on a high enough quality forage for them to get everything they need off the grass.
Okay.
Grass itself is very, very low in readily available nutrients, right? So that's why a chicken takes it in, kind of ferments it, and then grinds it. Rabbits take it, they ferment it, digest it, and then have a cud type chewing process as well to get more nutrients. So they don't have that ready available nutrients. Now, can you grow enough harvestable products for rabbits to live on their own without purchasing feed? Again, yes, with a very large asterisk of how much do you want to invest into this? Can you raise like stock beets, like sugar beets or mangels or some type of brassica like that they can eat? They like sweet potatoes. They like the sweet potato plant. They like the sweet potato itself. They will do fine on, like say, the tubers, the beets, the radishes, the stock beets, the mangels, the things like that. Again, and they love woody species. So if you are having an orchard and you prune your fruit trees, and they love the whips of the fruit trees, they love eating the bark off the fruit trees, of the pruned whips. Will they do well with weeds that you're harvesting out of your vegetable garden? Sure. Do they like comfrey? They love comfrey, the herb comfrey. All of those things add to a healthy rabbit. The question is, how much time do you want to invest in these things? So, if you're in a subsistence living, there's no taxes, there's no health insurance. It's just feed your family. Yes, you can raise rabbits off of things that you can grow yourself. However, we're back to easy. If you would like an easy source of meat protein for your family that's not out of the grocery store, I highly recommend a rabbit pellet. It's mostly an alfalfa pellet. If you want to stay away from GMOs, you have to go to the organic because alfalfa does have some GMO in it.
Fortunately,
it goes through the rabbit. I'm not super concerned about it. So if you come to Polyface, you might see some generic feed being used. It's a non-medicated alfalfa pellet. So it doesn't have, it's not like it has a bunch of medications in it, a bunch of additives and gross stuff. It just might have some GMO alfalfa. Take that for what it's will. That might get me really in trouble in the comment section, but we're focused on something else. And that something else is to breed a rabbit that does well eating pasture. And so one of the nice things about getting the rabbit pellet itself and the alfalfa pellet is that that the rabbit can self-medicate. And what I mean by self-medicate is that they can decide, okay, I'm not getting enough nutrients, whether that be, A to zinc or protein or fiber or whatever, out of this ration that I'm getting whether it be off the grass or some of these comfrey that I'm giving them or whatever, and they can go over and eat out of their cell feeder and medicate themselves based on their needs. Okay. And so what that means is that you can then not have to play veterinarian and Dr. Doolittle and all this stuff to try to get it balanced right. They can just go do it themselves. And I'm a big believer in the animal deciding what they need when they need it. Yep. So you can lay out, your salt licks and your mineral mixes and all this stuff. That suddenly becomes very difficult, right? Can your 7 to 10-year-old son or daughter go out there and give them a scoop of feed pellets to get them through the day when you need to go to 5 other things and the goats need a new fence set up and the garden's ready to be taken care of and you've got canning to do and all this stuff, right? So make a decision what you want to do, and that's for each person to make. And so I've laid out some feed sources. There are some great if you start Googling some stuff, there are some great resources out there for self-feeding rabbits. It's there, you can do it. But again, I like to eat the elephant a bite at a time, right? Yeah. So sometimes if you get a new animal, if someone calls me up and says, hey, I've got rabbits and they're not doing well, or they're not breeding, or if it's their first rabbits, or they're just a couple years into the rabbit production system and they're trying to do this alternative feed source stuff, it's very difficult for me to know what the rabbits are missing from a vitamin and mineral standpoint, or just a pure nutrient standpoint. Because remember, if an animal is not getting everything they need, the first thing they're going to shut down is the reproduction. They're just not going to reproduce. So for me, I say, hey, let's make it easy. Let's grow a lot of really delicious, nutrient-dense food in your backyard, quite literally, which rabbits can do. And let's let some other people who've developed this rabbit pellet, and again, you can go organic, you can get in a GMO-free pellet. Let's let them take care of that first, right? And after you build your skill set, seeing what rabbits can do, then you can move into some of this alternative food sources. And it's not that you can't give it to them as treats or as supplemental things, but just not totally cutting off the feed source right off. Again, especially at the beginning, year 1, year 2, maybe even year 3, 4, and 5. But once you get comfortable with rabbits and knowing how they operate, then you can begin weaning yourself off of other things when you're comfortable with the rabbit production itself. And that's kind of my thing on feed. Now, what does a rabbit eat on a regular basis? The nice thing is not a lot. You buy a 50-pound bag of feed, it lasts a breeding trio. We'll talk about that in a minute too. A breeding trio for literally months, right? A full-size rabbit is going to eat a full-size adult animal is going to be, we're going to say 7 to 9 pounds. There's some of the bigger size that are bigger, so they can be up in the like 10 to 12 pounds, but certainly a 9 to 11 pound rabbit is a very normal adult size rabbit. They are going to eat anywhere from 2 to 4% of their body weight every day. All right, in food pellets, right? In the alfalfa pellet. So for a full-size rabbit, that's like 4 ounces, right? Yeah. To give an idea of a 4 ounces, it's like, imagine a tuna fish can, like a full-size tuna fish can. That's about 4 ounces of feed pellets, right? So if you scoop that up and you give that to your, you really, as we talk about feeding, you really have to make sure, if you don't want your rabbits to get too fat, and they will, you do have to restrict feed them. So you don't want to just give them all they want. So it is important to measure. And so when you go to give it to them, if you have either a set, either a measuring cup or one of these things that say, okay, if I fill this to the top, it's 4 ounces or 3 ounces or whatever I need to be giving my rabbits. And you're going along and you're just scooping it out of your bucket or out of your little pail there. And you're just putting it right into the feeders. And that's how you can feed them. And you can literally feed 50 rabbits in just minutes because you're just scoop and dump, scoop and dump. Now, when the rabbits are growing, so if a doe is lactating, a doe is a female rabbit. If a doe is lactating so that means she's milking and she has babies, and or the babies are growing up to processing, then that's a different story. They get all the feed they want. So you just fill the feeder, fill it up. But they're still eating that now they're going to increase because she's lactating. So they're going to bump it up into like, maybe double. So you're at 8%. So you're at 8 ounces a day. But again, that 50-pound bag of feed is going to last your rabbits for quite some time. And it's not hard to stockpile it up. The pellets, because it's in a pellet form, last really long time. It's not like a crushed grain pellet or crushed grain mash, where you can lose a lot of your nutrients out of the kernel of the corn or the crop of grain because it's cracked, whereas it's back in that pellet. A lot of it's kind of sealed in, so it can last a lot longer. So you can buy multiple bags in advance, kind of stock that up. If you feel like the world's about to end, you can go buy 4, 5, 6 bags of rabbit feed, and it'll last you into the craziness.
Well, that's good. We all want to be ready for the craziness.
Right. Yeah.
You talk about mineralization, so I just want to ask, because people are going to be thinking this, and I just did a session with Carson from Redmond Minerals not too long ago. We've been talking a lot around here about mineralization, and I generally recommend to people that they keep, free choice loose salt available to all their livestock. I know you guys do that with your cows and all your ruminants and everything. That's what we've always done. Should we do that with rabbits, or are they getting enough from this prepared feed, these pellets?
Right. I will say this. I currently do not offer that. Redmond, don't shoot me. But
you guys use plenty of Redmond. There's no doubt about that.
That's right. That's right. So, real salt don't kill me. But I will say that, there's nothing wrong with that advice, and I would support that advice. And quite frankly, we just haven't taken the time to offer it free choice to see if they would eat it or not. We know that there is salt, which is not as good a salt as some of the other salts that are out there in the ration. So I think they probably would go for it. We just have not done it. So I cannot speak to that for the experience, but that's wise advice. There's nothing wrong with that. And again, that's easy. The only thing about rabbits is, again, they mostly like to chew on things. And so any type of feeder or container that you're going to put in there, they're either going to chew on it, gnaw on it, or dump it over. So anything with rabbits, it's really important to have it secured. So when you go onto a rabbit website, if you look up, like rabbit supply, there's a company called Bass Equipment, just like a fish, BASS equipment. And I don't sponsor them or anything. That's just one that comes to mind. There's others. And that is, if you go there, that everything that you're going to get from them has the wire clips that will clip onto the side of the cage to where the rabbits can't flip it over. So the idea of going and getting like a little dish or something like that, if you put that in the cage for the rabbits, even in the hairpin outside, they're going to flip it. And you're just going to waste a ton of mineral or a ton of feed. So just making sure that whatever you're using, whether it be waterer, feeder, mineral, hay feeding, etc., that they are either, nailed down, locked down, latched down, clipped down, so the rabbit doesn't flip them over.
Cool. Let's talk about processing or butchering for a minute. How, again, chickens are often a gateway. It's an easy place for people to get familiar with taking the life of an animal and processing it, getting it ready for preservation or consumption. How is that with rabbits?
Rabbits are so much easier. They're a skinned animal. You don't need a plucker, a scalder, nothing. You just need literally 2 strings on a board hanging up, and the rabbits hang up by their feet, and you deskin them and you gut them and you're done. I mean, so once you're proficient, you can be doing a rabbit every 5 minutes easily with 2 knives and 2 strings, pieces of paracord. It's that easy. So again, from an easy gateway, the reason rabbits are not popular is because people don't want to butcher them. That's the problem. That is the issue. They are way faster. They're way easier. You can control the genetics, and they're way less expensive to butcher because of equipment needs. So literally, if you said, hey, I want to have meat tonight for dinner, or rabbit aging is important. So rabbits are an herbivore, so it is important that they age a little bit. So it's best that they chill for 24 to 48 hours from processing to eating. They just eat a little better. Now, that's not to say you can't eat it tonight, but they usually are a little better if you let them age a little bit. Right. But that being said, if you want meat tonight, going out and tapping a rabbit and hanging it up and butchering it is way simpler than heating the water, scalding the water, or skinning the chicken, or whatever you're going to do. It's way simpler. From a harvesting perspective, there's some YouTube stuff out there, both from us or from other people, where it talks about, you basically are doing it like you would a wild squirrel or a deer, but you're essentially starting at the hind feet and working down. There's some other techniques that work from the center and ring the animal from the center and pull apart from to either end. The key part on the rabbits are that you want to make sure that you're not getting a lot of hair loose and then getting that hair all over the rabbit, because one major thing one of the biggest turnoffs to wild game, and I'll consider rabbit kind of a wild game, is getting hair in your meat. And whether it's deer, squirrel, rabbit, man, you start eating that and suddenly you get a hair. Ugh, not good. So when I do rabbits, I do hang them up by their feet, start at the back and work downward so that all the fur and all the hair is going downward. It's going away from the meat, and it all comes off like a glove. And then you're done. And so then you're splitting the belly, and you're harvesting all the organs, and you're pulling out all the intestines, and then literally it's rinsing and you're done. It's quite literally that simple. And I can, if I've got multiple, so I have 2 sets of paracord going, and I'll kill one, which is a stunning method. There are multiple ways to stun. We use the cervical dislocation, where we're actually taking a small blunt object and tapping on the back of the head, and it's a aggressive tap, and where you're going to stun the rabbit. Okay, and then you hang it up and you slit its throat, same way as a chicken, and it bleeds out. While it's bleeding out, I can skin and gut the other rabbit that's hanging on the other set of paracord, and then by the time I'm done with that, the one is bled out. I hang up another one and go to the next one. And I'm literally rocking along at 4 to less than 5 minutes a piece, just boom, 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 harvesting rabbits. And so it really is very, very simple.
Yeah, it's just really hitting me, especially with the processing and the lack of equipment, what a low barrier to entry this is for somebody to raise 100%. Their food.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely.
Just never really thought of that.
It's mostly mental. It is mostly mental. Yeah. I've sold many different breeding stocks to people, and then gotten them gifted back to me after they decided not to butcher them.
No, we all grew up with Peter Rabbit.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
It's a hard one, but it's one that we have to overcome as a people. And for you listeners that are thinking about doing this, or for looking ways to create a food supply, we have to change our understanding of our relationship to the animals. It doesn't mean we don't care for them. It doesn't mean we don't respect the life, but we do have to change the nature of the relationship in understanding for ourselves and with our kids. And that is very doable, but it takes a little shift. And if you can get over that, man, the rest of this is just so simple.
Yeah. And like I said, there's nothing wrong with having that constant supply of cute out there in the rabbitry. So, you know, hey, kids, go out there and play with those while we butcher them this time. Next time, we're going to, ease them in. There are things to way to ease them in. You don't have to have them watch the butchering the first time, but you're right. We got to climb that mountain.
Yeah. So let's talk about housing for a minute. That's another key piece here. And what are the basics? What do they need from basic to,
right,
maybe somewhat elaborate, from a cage maybe to a hairpin?
Yeah. So quickly on the rabbits, is the most important thing is they are individualistic. If we watch a nature show, you see one at a time. You don't see great big herds of rabbits running across. Okay. And that you'll see that if you're out, if you're sporting and you go out and you're, a sports person, you're out trying to hunt a rabbit, you see one, and then another couple hundred yards, you might see another one. Primarily that's done by the females for population and health control, right? So you don't have interbreeding and too much genetics in one spot. So they chase off the other young rabbits, both male and female, to get them away from them so that you don't have interbreeding. That being said, I know that there's some, people are going to instantly Google the colony thing. The colony rabbits. The thing about the colony rabbits, I've seen it work. I've seen people do it. So I'm not saying they're lying and it's not true. The grain of salt you need to take with that is realizing that you're going against nature's template, in that you typically don't have multiple does, which are the females, in a closed in area with other does, right? So they're typically, it's one doe in their given area, and they're maintaining their perimeter for population and genetic selection control. Okay. And so for that, when you bring that into a production setting in the backyard or in a homestead or even just commercial, it is a little more, you're giving the doe a little bit more similar to what the environment she likes by giving her individual, and I'll use the word cage. That's not a popular term, but you're giving her individual space. And when you commit to giving the doe, especially the doe, a individual space, then you want to make that space as cost effective as possible. So I'm not suggesting a 18 by 18 battery, 18 inch by 18 inch battery style cage where the doe can't turn around, all that. That's not what I'm suggesting. But I am suggesting a like 30 inch by 30 inch by 18 inch tall wire meshed cage, right? With a half inch by 1 inch square hardware cloth on the bottom, so to have a good support of their feet. And you have hard, like 1 by 2 hardware cloth around the side, or welded wire along the side. That keeps all the young bunnies in. I mean, remember, these bunnies, when they start hopping out of the nesting box, they can get through something the size of a mouse can get through. Okay. So if you have mice in your house, the rabbit can get in or out of your house. Okay. And so just think about that from the standpoint of controlling. So that's one of the reasons that I don't put the breeding stock with their young bunnies out on the pasture, because when you're talking about the hairpin, it is a wooden slatted floor shelter. I think I did send some pictures of that in, so maybe you can pop that in there. But
we'll get that on the blog post.
Yeah, so we can put that in there in this. But the idea of, it's a wooden slatted floor, and when the rabbits are like 6 weeks old and older, they will stay in 1.5 inch gap. Okay. And so you can give 1.5 inch slat between the wooden slats, and that's where the grass can come up through, and the rabbits can eat the grass, and they don't get out. If you do a floorless pen, all they need, remember, they only need something less than 1.5 inches to 2 inches big, and they can slip through. And imagine how quickly, I mean, think about your dog, like a dog in the yard. Imagine how quickly they can dig a 2-inch hole in your yard. Well, a rabbit is designed to dig. They're designed to burrow. That's what they're for. And so they can dig a 2-inch gap between the bottom of your shelter and the wild open prairie very quickly. I mean, literally within hours or minutes. Okay. So you cannot move your shelter fast. If you decide to go to a floorless shelter, you can't move it fast enough or put it on a flat enough ground to keep the rabbit from digging out. If you put wire on the bottom of the cage, it bends over the grass, and they can't eat it because it's on the other side of the wire, and they don't like eating stuff that's been over. The slatted floor allows the grass to come up through the floor and the rabbits to eat it in its natural state because it's standing erect or standing upright. That is coupled with the description of saying we're going to put the breeding stock and those very, very young bunnies in a wire cage inside, and then we're going to bring the pasture to them. So again, that's where we're going to cut and carry. We're going to cut our weeds from our garden and bring it to the rabbits. We're going to take anything from our vegetables that you made for dinner, and we're going to give that to the rabbits that night. We're going to harvest our comfrey in big leafy bundles, and we can give that to them, and they can eat that. That's where we bring the wild to the rabbits, and it works very, very well. Okay. But that way you can give your does their individual space, because they will literally sterilize each other. The dominant doe will, through fighting, biting, and hormones, will sterilize the lesser dominant doe. So if you're wondering why your does that are living together aren't having babies, only one of them is going to have babies typically. Okay. So giving them their space is important. So putting their does in their individual cages, putting the bucks in their individual cages so they can mark their territory, etc. Those are really important things so that your rabbits can, be successful and productive. Because if they're not producing babies, they're just pets.
Right. Yeah. Well, good. Let's see. We got a few things I want to make sure we get through. So let's talk about getting started and how many. Like, rabbits breed fast. So
Yes, they do. They multiply like rabbits for a reason. Yes, they do.
right. So what's your recommendation for getting started and what should you be prepared for?
Right. The breeding trio is great. Typically, that's two does and a buck, and that's a
Okay.
really good start. It gives you a little bit of genetic base. And so, typically, what I recommend people doing is getting a breeding trio. And then, after the buck is about maybe certainly 18 months, 18 to 24 months old, or let's see, excuse me, has been breeding for 18 to 24 months, you would cycle that buck out and bring in a new buck if
Mhm.
possible. You could keep your own buck, and they can breed their parents. So a buck can breed its mothers. So that would work. And that's not too close. However, it's a little close. So if you have the option, you would bring in your breeding trio. And then after about 2 years, you'd cycle out that buck and bring in another buck. After that, you have enough genetic diversity that you can save your own stuff.
Okay.
And you can keep everything in house. So the only time you would have to bring in something new is your original breeding trios and then your buck outside. Now, if you really want to do it where, okay, I'm going to travel, 8 hours and I don't want to have to go back and I don't know any other place, then you just get a quad and you just have to get another buck. And then you have enough genetic diversity to, or a couple extra does, however you want to do that. Because then if you want to keep a buck from a doe, let's say you get 4 does and you say, but doe number 4 is going to produce my new buck. Well, once you keep a buck from her, you determine to not save any does from her because that would be direct brother sister because it'd be the same father and the same mother,
Okay.
right? And if so, okay, let me do this as quickly and simply as possible. Doe number 4 gets bred to buck number 1. They have a baby, which is litters. Okay, that's what litters are called. They have kits, they have baby bunnies. That's a litter. You save a doe from that litter. Okay, buck number 1 and doe number 4 get bred again. They have another litter, right? And this time you want to save a buck from that litter. Well, the doe that you saved previously and that buck are actually brother and sister.
Right.
Right. And so what I'm getting at is if buck number 1 is bred to doe number 4, you determine that that doe will only give you a new male or a couple of males, and you will save no reproducing does from doe number 4 ever. She's just a meat producer and a buck producer, and that's it. And so
Sure.
ultimately she gets called out of the herd when she's done. And all of the does that you save from doe number 1, 2, and 3 are half sisters, half siblings to this buck. Okay. And that's a far enough genetic separation for you to breed back to each other. Okay. And so that's
Yep.
as simple as breeding genetic that I can label it down, but you can do that and it works. And it works very, very well.
I the point to take away here to me is that you can have pretty easily have a closed system fairly quickly on a food supply where you're reproducing everything you need to have an ongoing food supply. I think that's the big point,
Absolutely.
You need
Absolutely.
to know the
Think
nuances.
about the genetic pool. Think about the genetic
Yeah.
pool that, a doe having 5 litters a year at 6 to 7 bunnies per litter. So you're talking 30, 35 bunnies per year per doe. Okay. The genetic pool that creates versus, like, say, goats that have twins or triplets once a year, right?
Yeah.
You throw that in perspective and you see what the genetic pool does. And so you can literally pick the best does out of that 30, 35 and have your genetic trajectory going upwards, right?
Yeah.
Because you're seeing so many animals in a given season. And
Yeah. Yeah.
that's incredibly different from, say, a milk cow or some dairy goats or what have you.
Oh boy. Yeah. It's much, much faster. A lot more visibility.
So absolutely, a homestead can run a closed system and produce their own breeding stock with rabbits literally from day one if you get enough genetic diversity in that first buy.
Yeah. Okay. So say you get your trio.
Yep.
What should you expect from getting them settled to about first harvest? Or maybe it's to getting babies. What's gestation? What does it take to get them there? And of course, your harvest depends on if you're, taking them through to fryers, roasters, or stewers. But
Sure.
um, what's the time frame to get set up from getting your trio to
Right.
maybe
Well,
having meat on the table?
yeah, so there again, so gestation is about 28 to 32 days from
Yeah.
breeding to birth. And then you add your number of butcher weeks on top of that. So if you're going to butcher at 10 weeks, typically, and you've got a 4-week gestation, you're going to be 14 weeks. Now, the rabbits are going to be bred for the first time, typically in the 18 to 22 week range, depending on the breed. So it also depends on how much you're willing to spend. Like if you want to go and save some money on your initial buy, you may want to buy 8 to 10-week-old bunnies from the breeder, or just freshly weaned bunnies, 6 to 8-week-old bunnies.
Right.
That's going to save you some money up front, but you're going to have to then raise them that additional 10 to 8 to 12 weeks before you actually get your first breeding. Okay. And so that's something to consider. If you want rabbits right now, you're going to pay a little more, and you can start breeding them as soon as you get home. I mean, we sell rabbits sometimes, we sell breeding stock, and we'll keep them up into that 18, like kind of ready to breed range. But those are very expensive. When I say very expensive, $45 a piece, which is not bank breaking money, but it's, when you're compared to say $15 to $18 for a younger rabbit, it's a lot more.
Sure.
And again, when you're talking about buying a prize male goat, that's nothing. I mean, you might pay thousands of dollars for that animal. Okay. So it's not a lot of money, but in a rabbit money, it's a lot. So it just depends on what you want to do.
Okay. Well, you led right into the next thing with breeding, and that is which breed? The golden
Uh,
question. Everybody wants to know, what breed do
sure.
you use? I'm going to guess there's not a single answer, but can you run us
Yep.
through a little bit? Are there some common breeds that you think are good to look for? And are there some breeds that you should stay away from? Maybe they're popular, or just there's a reason you want to stay away from them.
Sure. Absolutely. Well, you hit the nail on the head. There's not a given answer, but for me, I mean, obviously make sure it's a meat breed, make sure it's a bigger breed. It doesn't have to be the gigantic. There's the extra small dwarf size. There's the fancy breeds like the lops and the things like that, which have the ears that go down, and they're primarily for pets. And then you have your large, your upper medium to large breed, and then you have your like extra large breed, and that upper medium to large breed is where you want to go. And so going down the list that you sent me earlier, that's your Californians, it's your New Zealands, it's your silver foxes, it's your satins, or some satins, depends on the breed. And I'm not, but you talk about going into like the standard chinchilla, but you get into the American chinchilla or the giant chinchilla, those can get very large. And
Yeah.
those are not wrong. They just take a lot longer to grow, and can then suddenly be a little more gamey or a little tougher depending on their age, because they're going to get that toughness because of age.
Okay.
New Zealand's, I typically stay away from those just because they're the darling of like your scientific society, because they're pure white. So they use them a lot for studies and scientific reasons. So, if you buy like shampoo and it says not tested on animals, typically that would have been done on rabbits, because they're white and anything that's going to pop up is going to show up on their white coat. If there's some type of allergic reaction or what have you. A nice Californian is a great breed. A nice silver fox is a great breed. But the most important thing, so take all that, ball it up, throw it in the trash, because the most important thing is getting something that's climatized to your area, right?
Yeah.
So if you can find a breeder, I don't care what they're breeding. Now, again, not dwarfs, because that's not going to yield much meat. But if they're breeding a meat rabbit that's in that medium, in that upper level medium to large breed frame size, again, which is an adult, a female of 9 to 11 to 12 pounds. Okay.
Mhm.
And they're in your climate, so your area, so your guys are Idaho, you got Wisconsin, Washington, Oregon, Idaho, maybe Montana, kind of right in there. So you've got those kind of basic ideas. Those are that area. That's what you want to do, because they're programmed and they're genetically selected and they're set up to succeed in your environments. And that's cold winters, it's dry air, all the things that make you guys special, whatever makes you guys different there in that area. Get animals in that area, and across the country is the same, right? So I would much rather, would I love to sell Homestead family from breeding stock here from Polyface in Virginia? Absolutely. But I would not recommend it because it's not a good fit. So I would much rather you find something close to home, even if it's not perfect. You might do your research and like, oh, I love silver foxes. They're so beautiful. And that's what I want. Great. But the closest silver fox is 5 states away. And there's a Californian breeder right down the street. Get the Californians. Start there. Do, again, easy. If they're already set up to your microclimate, go with that.
Yeah. And that's not to go sideways too far, but that's just such an excellent point about buying livestock in general for homesteaders new into getting livestock. That is so important. We get so caught up in breed types and overlook climate and them being bred to survive well in your environment. So
100%, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, last question here, and this one again is a ballparker. I know there's not a one answer, but typical startup cost, like can we put a, $250 to get started, $500 to get yourself a decent setup, get your trio, get that bag of feed. Can we give people any ballpark?
Absolutely. If you're gonna do the wire style cages that I'm recommending for inside, and again, you're gonna do deep bedding under that. You're gonna put some leaves. You're gonna put some wood chips. You're gonna put some type of carbonaceous collection so that you can mix. We didn't touch on manure, but so that you can collect their manure. It'll turn into some beautiful compost. I do recommend kind of catching it in some type of carbon, even if you want to. You can put it on direct on your garden, but I do recommend putting it and catching it in your carbon. Again, that's leaves, wood chips, straw, that kind of thing. And if you can turn it with chickens or baby pigs or something like that, that works out even better, right? So they're continuing to stir it instead of you having to clean it out with a shovel, right? But rabbit manure is very gentle. It can go on plants very easily. So you're going to start with that. And so if you got the cages at eye level and the manure is falling down through, you're going to capture that manure in some type of carbon that can be cleaned out, once a month, once a year, depends on how it builds up, right? But if you build a couple of those cages, I have not had to build them for a while, so I'm ballparking the pricing, but you could build, 6 to 8 of these cages for $200 to $300 easily, and that's fully supplied with self feeders. Get automatic waterers. The little tubing is easy. They got little nipple drinkers. They attach to the edge of the cage. It goes to a 5-gallon bucket. The pipe plumbs right into the bottom of the bucket. You fill the bucket, and it's automatically gravity flow water to all of your rabbits. Right. So get that. Those cost literally. The little nipple drinkers are like $1.60. Get them. They're easy. Right. So get those. After that, you want to make sure that that you have the right kind of wire. Go ahead and buy the good wire. Don't buy the cheap stuff. Get the good welded wire, put it together nicely, etc. So yes, buying the trio, everything, you should be well under $500 to get a breeding trio, get your cages set up. I'm not charging you for the labor because you're going to do this on weekends, on evenings. It's going to be a family event or whatever. But if you're just buying out-of-pocket costs, you're well under $500 to get your breeding trio. And remember, if those 2 does produce well, that's the potential of 60 bunnies in a year. And they're going to dress out at 3 pounds a piece, right? So you're going to yield probably a little over 2 pounds of meat. Like if you deboned it, you're about 2 pounds of meat per animal. So 60 rabbits. Let's be nice. Let's say you're going to have some problems. You're going to have some mistakes. Let's go 50 rabbits. So 50 rabbits, 2 pounds of meat. That's 100 pounds of meat, right?
Yeah.
For the very first season, even if you spent $500, which you shouldn't, you're paying that back. That's only $5 a pound in boneless meat. And the stuff that you invested in the cages, I have cages that I built when I was 10 years old. I'm 40 something. They last for literally forever. They last a long, long time. So you have a long, long payoff to build these cages, and the upfront cost lasts a very long time. And like I said, once you get your breeding trio going, you don't have to redo it all the time. You're able to build that in-house. So you're not having to go out and buy more breeding stock.
Well, you've just about talked me into rabbits, and I've
Good.
never been interested other than hunting, but I might have to have one of the kids watch this and see if I can egg them on.
I love them. I mean, I unfortunately have moved on to some other things. I don't do them personally like I used to, and I miss it. But they are still part of our operation. They're wonderful for that empty shed or that greenhouse that sits there in the winter, and you're like, what do I do with this thing? It's just some great little spots. They fit in around places. Again, I've seen people hang these cages that I'm talking about on a little skid structure, and the skid structure pulls like once a week, and then the manure just drops right on the ground. It can be dropping right on a future garden spot. It can be dropping out in a little pasture area. So you're directly spreading it, and you're moving it like once every weekend. And that gives you your automatic spread of your rabbit manure. And that works out really well.
Oops. Well, something happened here, folks. We lost our feed for a few minutes, and but we were just about to the end anyway. So I want to say thank you to Daniel for coming and hanging out with us here at the Pantry Chat. I sure learned a whole lot about rabbits, and I really had no idea how easy they are and how much of a complete system they are. In homesteading, we often think about really meat chickens or broilers as being kind of the gateway, the easy path to start raising your own meat. But I think that Daniel has just made a great presentation on how rabbits really might be the better alternative for a lot of people. So I hope you've enjoyed this. If you're looking for a pathway to start raising more of your own meat or getting started, check this out and look into it a little bit further. And I'm sure there's some good resources and books out there. We'll get a few of those in the notes for you. And Daniel, it was great hanging with you. Thanks for being here today. All of you guys, thanks so much for being here. And of course, if you want to know more about Daniel Salatin and what he does, you can check out polyfacefarms.com. You can check out their social media as well. And then if you have not made plans yet to come to the Modern Homesteading Conference, I want to highly encourage you to do that, where Daniel will be speaking, as well as Joel, myself, and a whole lot of other great folks. So come hang out with us there, check it out, and I look forward to seeing you next time on the Pantry Chat. See you soon.